Hello, my name is Simon. Welcome to Why Is That, a free speech platform where we explore big ideas and the controversies of our time. Hello, beloveds, and welcome back to another episode of Why Is That? Why am I sounding a bit loud and worked up? Well, I finally moved out of my place today after 3 months of getting rid of a whole house worth of stuff. Oh, yeah, you have no idea. But now, rather being a rampant materialist, I can really say I'm a minimalist. And I intend to stay that way. Hopefully. I say hopefully if there's one superpower that runs through my family is just material stuff just comes to you. And I might be being published again soon. So a whole lot of things have been on my back, which I haven't been able to put as much time and effort into the show as I would have liked. So this will probably be the last show done off the top of my head for a while. I get to plan things well in advance now, including one monumental show for, well, the show. So what will I be talking about there off the top of my head today? Love and honour. Do these two topics deserve quite a lot more preparation than probably going to the show? Yeah, most definitely, but the one thing I would like to impart to my audience is life is usually very messy, and sometimes you have to make do. And being a social commentary show will somehow work it so the topics touch into society or something like that. You might think, is this guy serious? Yeah, sure, why not? I'm very tired right now, but I'm free. Finally, I'm free. So what made me want to do the show now? Well, I came across a good little video on love. Now, I wanted to do a show on honor and integrity, but the two of those are pretty much interlinked, where love is it's related. I mean, it's not the same thing, but the two kind of need to interplay. I mean, these days, love is quite a misunderstood notion. It's been stretched, it's been watered down, it's been used so very casually. Now, the type of love we'll be covering is friendship. The type of Aristotelian philosophy I study, friendship also covers romantic relationships. Because if somebody's in a romantic relationship and they're not even, could be termed friends with that person, something is, I think we would all recognize it as seriously, seriously wrong. And we wouldn't say that would be the most loving relationship there is. Now, you have some couples that go, oh, my significant other is my best friend. And that's nice. It doesn't have to be, though. It can be somebody else. I mean, I love my best friend very, very much. But if I meet a woman capable of taking the role of best friend off my mate, yeah, no, I'm going for that woman. But here's the clip I was talking about.
Young man, why are you eating that fish? And the man says, because I love fish. He says, oh, you love the fish? That's why you took it out of the water and killed it and boiled it. He said, don't tell me you love the fish. You love yourself. And because the fish tastes good to you, therefore, you took it out of the water and killed it and boiled it. So much of what is love, right, is fish love, right? And so, young couple falls in love. Young man and young woman fall in love. What does that mean? That means that he saw in this woman someone who he felt could provide him with all of his physical and emotional needs. And she saw in this man somebody she feels that she can write. That was love, right? But each one is looking out for their own needs. Right? It's not love for the other. The other person becomes a vehicle for my gratification. Too much of what is called love is fish love. Right? An external love is not on what I'm going to get, but what I'm going to give. We had an ethicist, Rabbi Dessler, who said, people make a serious mistake in thinking that you give to those whom you love. And the real answer is, you love those to whom you give. And his point is, if I give something to you, I've invested myself in you, right? And since self-love is a given, Everybody loves themselves. Now that part of me has become in you, right, there's part of me in you that I love. Right? So true love is a love of giving, not a love of receiving.
I thought that was a very good and succinct way of covering that very important point. Love is a very selfless thing. It is a preference for another, or the other in philosophical talk, if you want to get technical, which, yeah, kind of do. And that preference is preferring that person over yourself. And this is why it's very important that love is reciprocal. Because if they don't have that preference back, well, that can get really messy in terms of they'll just take, and including being taken for granted. And I've seen that suck the life out of people, really. But to get very technical, it is a continuous act of the will. Now, it really, really pisses me off when people talk about love feeling and, I'm just not feeling a relationship anymore, or whatever. Feelings really come and go, and love is not a feeling. When a relationship starts, yes, it's all very exciting and all possibilities and potential and being cute. Like texting her, I don't know what to do for the date yet. All I've got planned is holding your hand. And she texts back, oh my God, I'm blushing right now. But as relationships go on, you get familiar, you have history, and you're very comfortable with each other. It is not like at the beginning at all. And there's that very specific term, young love, where, well, reality really isn't set in for the young bastards. And not to disregard their feelings, but they haven't really had a depth of experience, such as long-term, committed adult relationships, which, to be honest, some young people have never ever witnessed. I mean, their parents might have divorced when they were younger, etc. They've had siblings that have jumped from relationship to relationship, so that they've just had no model for healthy relationships. I mean, there's a practice in some Christian churches where young newlyweds find a old married couple who sort of have a successful relationship and have them kind of mentor them, or be able to go to them for advice, to basically get the wisdom of the elders and maybe perspective. There are so many people out there that just reinvent the wheel, but warning, this might result in conservatism and traditionalism. We wouldn't want that now, would we? But to be honest, we would more associate love with sort of young love at the beginning of the relationship type excitement than sort of the married man who has had a long day at work, has gone to bed, his wife is coughing, or they don't have any cough medicine, so he gets up, he's exhausted, he's tired, but he goes out to get it for her and isn't feeling warm fuzzies because of it. But it's an act of the will. It's an act of preference for the other over oneself. Too often it is, as the philosopher we just heard from, fish love. You're getting something out of it. It's not preference for the other. It's what you get out of it yourself. Now, oh dear God, relationships are confusing things, so there is seriously no firm black and white on that issue. But also I say a word on realism, because there are a lot of people out there who tend to idealize people they're in relationships with, especially, leading up to and when they first enter into it. But in these situations, you can't have, a preference for the other when the other's not real. It's this character you've made up in your mind. To love someone deeply, you have to know them. Now, you could have a love for all of mankind. It's not a deep love for each individual because you don't know each individual. There is some degree of attachment that is needed for a deep love. And strangely, that attachment does require sacrifice. So to get something, you have to give up something, which so many people today aren't willing to sacrifice. But if you prefer the other over yourself, you will make sacrifices. Now, I've seen people who know this, but have made sacrifices for someone who was not really reciprocating. So they sacrificed and gave and gave and gave, and the other person took and took and took. And of course, it's disastrous. You need trust in a relationship. And if the other person's not going to reciprocate with your self-interest, then they don't have your back. I mean, I've talked a lot about romantic love, but, this is also in friendship as well, like platonic friendship. If they will not do the same thing for you, like have your back, then it's why would you have theirs? And strangely, how the language reflects the reality. When you say will not, it is an act of the will. Sometimes people aren't capable of doing some things, but if they are, they require the will to also go through and do it. For example, I was in a leadership group with two mates of mine, and one of them was basically being bullied by the head of the group, and I called that person out, and they launched all these accusations against me because they didn't want to be exposed. And our other mate, who had seen the evidence, didn't speak up. He had seen the emails that proved our case, but stayed silent. He's no longer a friend of mine. He did not have our backs, and nor will we have his any time in the future. Basically, we just have no time for cowards like that, who basically showed a preference for himself. And this brings me on to the topic of honour, which I would say is quite interlinked with love. Now, honour is kind of an abstract concept, but it's heavily linked with integrity and credibility and fidelity. The framework for honour is virtue, which we've covered in a previous show. It was a very introductory, basic show. I hope to do future shows with guests to go deeper on various topics to do with virtue. We all kind of have an idealized version of ourselves, and we'd like to reach it. But what a lot of people don't realize is the practice of virtue and having honour, having credibility and integrity is so key to getting there. I mean, like, you can't eat fast food all the time and not work out and expect to do well in a marathon, or even finish a marathon, or even to attempted one and not having a heart attack. So often people neglect the fundamentals because of a lot of the time, tragically, they have never been exposed to them. For example, a lot of people who are working class or poor would like to live a comfortable middle-class life. And a number of groups have done research and found there are 3 things needed for that. To at least finish secondary school, hold a full-time job for a year, and wait until you're about 21 to get married and have children. And there are a number of people who have made decisions which have been detrimental to success in life. They've left secondary school. They haven't been able to hold down a job. They've got a very bad work history. And had people who had children as teenagers or had a wedlock, and we're not just talking about women, we're talking also men who have to pay child support. All these things have provided barriers to the middle class, and it's rightfully so. I mean, we used to have a concept before the welfare state of deserving and undeserving poor. Sort of somebody's made a widower through no fault of their own, and that's left them impoverished, then they're deserving of help. Where if somebody's just a jackass and an alcoholic and won't get help, well, they're not very deserving. And if you notice, a lot of the people who were considered deserving were honourable people. Like widows were considered deserving poor, were single mothers that got knocked out of wedlock, were considered undeserving poor. Now, there's a big reason honour and sexuality were hugely linked, which I'll get into later. But for now, I kind of want to focus on how honour is a practice thing, as it's heavily linked to virtue. You can't have honour and be considered also, at the same time, a dishonest person. And of course there are truth tellers, liars, and I would also say just people. And by that I mean, some people, if they go, well, don't you think I have honesty, integrity? And it's like, not especially. I'm not saying you're a liar. I'm not saying you're particularly a courageous truth teller. I mean, everyone can tell the truth when it's pretty straightforward and there's no consequences, but telling the truth where there are consequences kind of makes you aware who is a honourable person and who all of a sudden becomes a conspirator, covering up something because they don't want to suffer the consequences of telling the truth. We don't give honours, such as knighthoods, etc., to mediocre people. Honours are given to people who have been tried and have not been found wanting. Now, there are a lot of people out there that haven't been tried at all. They haven't been found wanting, nor have they been found deserving. You may have lived a life, but you might not have a record where you stood out to show your honourable deeds. And I know so many people who have kept quiet for a peaceful life. They know something unjust and dishonest is going on, but they won't hold those people to task at all. They could possibly fight fiercely for loved ones, but would turn a blind eye that would see somebody else's loved ones affected. And in turn, because of this culture of silence, their loved ones might be affected. Dishonourable things don't really irk them. It's only if it affects them. Okay, as I said, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I'll go to the honour linked to sort of sexual morality. A lot of people think Victorians were just prudes, that, it was just over-the-top Puritanism for no reason. That couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, in their day and age, sex outside of marriage was dangerous. I mean, not only was there things like syphilis, which were seriously going around, which would pretty much destroy a person who contracted it, but just the suffering that was inflicted on single mothers who had, children out of wedlock, who at best were supported by their family, but was a burden on the family and probably wouldn't find a good husband or a husband at all because of it. And of course, in the more upper class, scandal could bring you down. And this is why also past ages have also practiced this, as a lot could go wrong with sex outside of marriage. And this is why honour covered this area. And even today, we've mitigated the effects, but ultimately they're still there. I mean, what's termed the sexual market value of a single mother? A lot of guys do not view women who have had children with other men as desirable. And a big thing is the priority for them will always be their children who are not yours. It also harms society in terms of the welfare state. We've covered it in our previous show, the Victoria University Business School study that showed the average New Zealand woman draws $150,000 more than she pays in tax over her lifetime. And a lot of that is single mothers who are requiring state support. And the reason the state debt keeps growing bigger and bigger is because we have to pay for the welfare state. In ages past, such women wouldn't be considered honourable, and the fathers of these illegitimate children would be considered dishonourable men who dishonoured the woman. And even today, that can lead to financial struggle. And if you honoured the person and loved the person, you would probably not have children with them out of wedlock. I mean, this might all sound terribly old-fashioned, but out of no part of loving and honouring someone does it involve lifelong negative consequences. Now, on the theme of hardship, I mean, cultures of honour, according to one expert, Richard Nesbitt, came out of three conditions. One, a scarcity of resources. Two, situations in which the benefit of theft and crime outweighs the risks. And three, a lack of sufficient law enforcement. Pretty much it was a form of self-government. Now, this kind of leads me on to an excuse to play a Stefan Molyneux clip about 4 ways rules can be enforced.
So society is basically a collection of people who all agree on the same rules. So there can be a few exceptions, but societies can't survive by playing whack-a-mole with everybody trying to get away with breaking the rules. And diversity really is the fragmentation of acceptable rules into often opposing rules, and then it's just a game of grab the state to impose your rules on others, just like every other kind of theological warfare where there's no separation of state and delusion. Now, there are basically only 4 ways that rules can be enforced in society. Number 1 is they are internalized by people themselves. Everybody tries to be good, or a lot of people try to be good because they accept and recognize virtue and want to be better people. Number 2 is they don't really internalize the values, but they're afraid of negative consequences. And this can be internalized, right? So you feel shame or guilt, or maybe you fear hell or want to get into heaven and so on. These are all internal states, a desire for virtue or fear of punishment that you yourself will inflict or is inflicted by some non-state agency. Now, that's all the internalized states. The externalized states, number 1 is, of course, the state threatening you with jail or rewarding you with continued relative liberty. That's another reason or way that people can conform in society. And the last is through ostracism. If people aren't forced to interact by the state, then they can choose not to interact with people who disobey social rules. And given that we all need the interaction of other people to survive and flourish in a civilized society, then ostracism is really the most powerful way to do it. Now, here's one of the issues with atheists, right? The first 2, the internal states, they are predicated on people believing in a God who intervenes and rewards and punishes. So perhaps you believe in God and you wish to emulate Jesus or whoever, and so you want to be good, and that's why you do the right thing. The second is maybe you don't really internalize it, but you are afraid of hell and you want to get into heaven, and so you go and do that. Now, when you take away God, you take away these first 2. So what is left? Well, you either go to pure ostracism, and that takes a very voluntary society, a stateless society. States are all violations of one's capacity to ostracize. Forced association, of course, is the nature of the state, and it is a violation of freedom of association. So there's no ostracism, there's no real internalized state, there's no threats of heaven and hell, so what are atheists left with? Well, they're left with the state, which is why atheists in general tend to gravitate towards using the state to comply to social norms, to force people to comply to social norms, which, if they're not internalized, is a never-ending process of whack-a-moles. The moles are always multiplying, the hammers are always getting bigger, and the freedoms are always diminishing.
So, yeah, traditionally people would internalize, in a more Christian society, would internalize pretty much honor and virtue and seek to act lovingly, or even if they hadn't internalized it, they would fear the consequences of breaking it. But now, in a relativistic and more atheistic environment, what do you internalize? You can't. There is no standard, pretty much. What do you internalize? That there's not a firm belief shared by everyone in society anymore. And therefore, in the second one, you're not afraid. If you haven't internalized it yourself, you're not afraid of outside consequences. And you're not going to be ostracized because pretty much, it's all whatever floats your boat. And, of course, the fourth one, it falls back on the state, who seems hell-bent of removing the consequences from people. And there are always consequences. They might mitigate it, but they can't really take it away. There's no deserving and undeserving poor because, well, frankly, there is no standard to judge. Well, recently with the high-profile case of the mother who was convicted of assaulting her daughter, who died at the hands of somebody else, but has had 4 other children after that, most of them taken away from child, youth and family. But of course is still receiving from a guy who's 40 years older than she is, and they still keep giving her welfare checks, and she just kept having children. Can't say there's a lot of honour there, and you can't say there's a lot of it's a loving relationship between 2 grown adults and towards the mother and her children. Okay, I'm getting off track a bit, but we used to have a Christian society and that had concepts of light, love and honour attached to it, and now we don't. So as we go forward into the future, what are we to do? It is a basic fundamental need to be loved. People who feel unloved and don't have anyone to love them are generally quite miserable people. And a lot of people just expect to be loved for who they are without being quality people. Without being positive traits are attractive. If you want to find someone and you're overweight, put the pizza down and work out. Get in shape. And if you want to find a romantic love or better friends, be such a good quality person, no one could say no to you. Be the sort of person people want to be around. And I mean quality people as well. When you're younger, you kind of want a huge community because you sort of socialize in that way. But as you get older, you just want a small group of people you can rely on. Have you ever been put to the test? And if not, do you think you would pass if you ever were? If not, well, doesn't that require some self-reflection? It's never too late to turn your life around. But you have to realize to get where you want to go, you have to have discipline, which discipline is needed for love, and honor is part of having that discipline. This is why you had honor codes such as chivalry and Bushido, so you could continuously work on self-improvement. There was a standard, you could hold yourself to it. And don't we just have a loving fascination for things like knights and samurai? But to have discipline, you have to have will. And of course, love is a continuous act of the will, wanting better for other people. But how many people focus on strengthening their will, their endurance? Hell, just things that will genuinely help them in life. Okay, I'll end it there as I've moved and got stuff into the editor so I can put a lot more time into these shows rather than doing off the top of my head, and also secure guests. So, till next time.